Taking off from the portrait of the perfect man, let us explore the Tao within. The power of the Tao is not the exclusive property of the sage, or of you or of me. Taoism teaches that everyone has the potential to become the sage, because everyone simply has the Tao within them. The 5th century Taoist text, the Shi Shang Jing, says that Lao Tzu taught, human beings are within the Tao. The Tao is within human beings. The Tao is not only within me, rather, the myriad beings all have it. The myriad beings don't know about it, but the Tao naturally rests with them. I would say that at this stage, the Tao is dormant. It awaits the coming of the rain and the sunshine to germinate, its green sprouts appearing just at the surface of consciousness. This sprouting of the Tao is the Buddhist thought of enlightenment, bodhicitta. Taoist sages taught that you should never seek the Tao anywhere outside of yourself. The Tao Te Ching says, one may know the world without going out of doors. One may see the way of heaven without looking through the windows. The further one goes, the less one knows. Therefore the sage knows without going about. Joshi said, we need not talk of empty and faraway things. If we would know the reality of Tao, we must seek it within our own nature. Each has within him the principle of right. This we call the Tao, the way. Specifically, we call the principle of right, in Jeremiah's terms, the Lord our righteousness, and in the terms of Saint Germain and Jesus Christ, the Holy Christ self, the middle figure in the chart. The 18th century Taoist adept, Liu Yiming, called the Tao within the original essence. The original essence. When you say the word and meditate on it as a substance, you can feel the vibration of your own original essence. Just think about it. I cannot think of adjectives for it, but I can feel that I have an original essence, and I can sense what it is. This original essence Buddhists call the seed of the Buddha. The Tao is in the body, Liu Yiming wrote. Within the body is hidden another person who always accompanies you, whatever you do, awake or asleep. It is always there. Looking, listening, talking, walking, it is very, very close. This is not the awareness of conditioned knowledge. It is the original sane energy, vitality, and spirit. If you seek this in terms of form or shape, you are mistaking the servant for the master. The body is not the master. The body is simply the servant of a higher master, the great Tao. The 4th century BC Taoist sage Zhuangzi spoke of an underlying source of being that is a master or director within all things. This is God's light and life and energy and consciousness, as we even speak of electricity or the electron as self-luminous, intelligent substance. Substance itself, the ascended masters teach us, has an intelligence programmed into it. And we observe the marvel of this in the cells of the body. He also described this master as having no form. I do not know what makes things the way they are. There seems to be a real director or true master, yet I find no trace of him. He can act, that is certain. Yet I cannot see his form. He has identity but no form. This master or director is our true inner teacher. And thus it is written, perfected people learn from a teacher that never dies. Hindus call him the indwelling Atman, the identity of Brahman who lives in the inner folds of the garment of being. So you see, God is hiding in your coat closet. Some Taoist writers speak of the Tao within each individual as De, or virtue. The word De has been translated as virtue, power, action, life, inner potency, integrity of character, again the real self, again the perfect man, the perfect sage, the Son of God, individualized, personified for each one of us. It is not what we would normally think of today as virtue in the sense of morality. De is essentially the Tao made manifest. The Ascended Masters teach that this Holy Christ self is the light emanation or light manifestation of the I am that I am. Holmes Welch says, Tao is the underlying unity. De is its power, and the power of the man who follows it. The teaching is that virtue is power. And what is virtue? But when you see a sun as a sun and a fire enfolding itself, drawing into itself that identity, which is the Son of God. When we say Christ, the adjective we hear that embodies all is virtue. And then virtue is like a great blossom that unfolds with so many petals. De, virtue, is the manifest power of the unmanifest Tao. Virtue can only be when it is in action. This is the definition of the Son of God. The essence of the Tao that lives in our temple is this virtue personified. The personification of virtue we know and love as our Holy Christ self, that presence within, that still small voice that often becomes a little more loud and a little more loud to get our attention when things are reaching an extreme in our lives. And then and again it is a gentle voice that almost has a little echo as though it were in a chamber or a room somewhere, just speaking to us. Our souls know the voice, the heartbeat, the footstep of our true shepherd. God has not left us comfortless, and the mystics of all ages have defined this inner person. Victor Mayer writes, De signifies the personal qualities or strengths of the individual, one's personhood, or as we would say, one's Christhood. When Mayer says, De is determined by the sum total of one's actions, good and bad, I interpret this to mean that one chooses to take the light of the sun, or Christ's self, to use it for good or bad deeds, thereby making good or bad karma. Mayer says each creature, each object, has a De, which is its own manifestation of the Tao. Wing Sit Chan says, while Tao is common to all, it is what each thing has obtained from Tao, its De, that makes it different from others. You have plucked a certain fruit from the tree of life, the tree of your Christ self. And you have said, this is the fruit I like best. I will plant the seed. It will grow and increase in me. I will become this. This will be the nature of my identity. This will be who I am. This specific fruit of virtue. How it has applied the energy and the virtue of De to form the outer and inner self is what makes up your personality and my personality. The free will choices people make, says Wing Sit Chan, cannot mar the De, but they do mar the soul and the corresponding soul personality. We can never mar the Christ in all his glory, but we can mar our own souls for refusing to be the mirror of that Christ. The sage is singled out as the one fit to rule because he has cultivated virtue, or De, according to the Tao. The Tao Te Ching teaches, it is Tao that gives life to all things. When you say the word Tao, you get a sense of a great cosmic order and of infinite potentialities that you can pick from, as though you were standing under the biggest tree that you have ever seen that fills the entire cosmos. and in it are all of the possibilities that anyone could ever become or realize, all in an ordered manner. There's this sense of such divine order that no matter how far out or different might be our calling in God, the entire potentiality of what we can realize has already been manifested in the great Tao. And if it is already in existence, then shall we not release the tension of non-being and simply let it descend gently into our lives until piece by piece and point by point we internalize, then we externalize what is ourself. Tao gives life to all things. It is virtue, the inner Christ, that nurses them, grows them, fosters them, shelters them, comforts them, nourishes them, and covers them under her wings. Zhuangzi taught, when Der is achieved, one is said to have returned to one's original nature. We are not seeking to become something new. We are seeking to become who we were once upon a time. The original nature is what we long for, because when we were created and we looked up into the eyes of our Father, Mother, God, we saw who we were. We saw our original nature as coming from them. We knew who we were. And we went forth into these matter spheres, ever denser and more dense. We lost the memory of the image. It's like forgetting what a friend looks like, whom you haven't seen in 40 years, and whose photograph you have lost, and you just can't quite remember the features of that person. That's how we have forgot. And as you know, it has come about by angels who took the left-handed path and determined that we would forget our point of origin. Back to that point is our goal. Returning to one's original nature is returning to the Tao, to one's original source. In virtue, the Holy Christ Self, the soul returns to the image and likeness of the Tao in which she was made. Stepping into and finding herself congruent with a matrix, that is the womb of the Tao, she is unfettered by the imperfect manifestation of the former self. Once you step into the original matrix, you are no longer burdened or concerned. You are unfettered. You no longer carry the burdens of who you became, that was the defensive self, the ego self, the personality self, not tethered to the true personality of God. In other words, when you finally see the real and you head for the sun, all those things that were behind fall away. One with virtue, the soul slips easily into the Tao, even as the sunbeam withdraws to her source. Returning to one's source is an important theme in all mystical writings. In the Hindu Upanishads we read, as from a blazing fire, sparks, essentially akin to it, fly forth by the thousand, so also, my good friend, do various beings come forth from the imperishable Brahman, and unto him again return. The Christian mystic Jacob Boehme often referred to God as man's native country, as his true origin and home. God is our native country. The soul of man, he said, is always seeking after its native country, out of which it has wandered, seeking to return home again to its rest in God. This is Taoism, pure and simple. Lao Tzu says, returning is the movement of the Tao. All things flourish, but each one returns to its root, to its youngness, to its origin. According to Taoism, all of our troubles begin with our sense of separation from the Tao. We don't even remember that we are a part of the Tao. And because we have lost contact with our source, we have lost the spiritual power we once had. And that is the real key. When you lose the power that you had to be who you were, then how can you be who you were again until you find the key to restore that power? Think of yourself when you are ill, you don't feel well, you have little strength. Are you yourself? Can you be the full fervor of yourself on that day? You can't be yourself without power. And so losing the source of power is really the root problem and cause of all of our incomplete psychology. To be who we are, we have to invoke the power we once had. We must now learn how to restore that power by cultivating the Tao. Don't you love the word cultivate? With all of its meaning. Cultivation is prayer and meditation and hard work. It is keeping on. It is establishing a mighty rhythm of life and getting into the rhythm of the cosmos itself. Cultivation is like when you tend a garden, when you nourish friendships and loves, and so they blossom. But when you do not nourish them, they fade away. All life needs cultivation, beginning with your own soul. Taoists often describe returning to the Tao as becoming like an infant. The infant represents one's original state of purity and wholeness. It's like the little girl who kept begging her parents to leave her alone with her new baby brother. Her parents were afraid that if she were jealous, she might hurt her baby brother. But the little girl was so insistent that her parents finally agreed, and they listened closely on the intercom to what might be happening. When the little girl and her brother were finally alone, she crept near his crib. They heard her whisper, "Tell me about God. I'm forgetting." "Tell me about God. I'm forgetting." Let us, as the little child, seek and find the perfect man who can bring to our remembrance what God is like. Notice the words are what God is like. We cannot know God, but we can know what he is like. He is like a rose and a rainbow and a little child. He is like so many things. If we know him in all of these things, somewhere inside of us, that inner real self puts it all together, and we do have a sense of knowing God. We love the ascended masters because in their oneness with the great Tao, they have given us their profile of God. They have allowed us to see something of God that we do not see when we look at our own face in the mirror. But when we look at them, we say, this is what God must be like. I used to look at Mark many times, not just when he came from the platform in his beautiful silk robes after a dictation, and when he was glistening with light, literally dripping with light, but in all kinds of situations and places and circumstances. And how often I would say to myself, this is what God must be like. This is what God must be like. It's like when I first had the experience of seeing the dictations that he gave at the 4th of July conference in 1961 in Washington, D.C. It was such a spectacular thing to see this man stand all day, deliver dictations, deliver lectures, after one celestial being after the other. And I thought to myself, truly this is the work of God. No one can do this except he be the instrument of God. Mark was such a transparent instrument that you could really know God when you saw him. This is what we have to seek in one another. We don't have to be perfected beings for God to shine through us and tell another what God is like. This can happen every day in small and great ways. So the perfect man is the perfect teacher. Let us listen as he unveils the mysteries of the Tao. The seeker asks, how did I lose the power of the Tao? Yes, indeed, we do ask that question. The perfect man answers, you have gradually depleted your original vitality, energy, and spirit through your passions and the misuse of your senses. This has happened not just in a lifetime, but over many, many lifetimes. And where there is the squandering of light, we come back with so much less of an endowment of sacred fire that is planted in the very root, the bulb of the tree of life, the base chakra. And the implanting of that initial thrust of energy becomes less and less because of our karma of having wasted it in the past. And so we do not see mighty men and Amazonian types of women. We do not see the great strength of body, the fortitude of mind, the focus, the concentration, the mind that is capable of comprehending things near and far. We do not see such specimens of people today. They are rare. So as far as losing the endowment of sacred fire, we know that we can invoke that light and that sacred fire through dynamic decrees, through the violet flame, through calls to God, devotions, rosaries, prayers, affirmations to Jesus Christ, and so forth. And so we can begin to increase. But as we increase the light, we must remember that we don't have the increase to squander it again and to lose it again. This time we are weaving the deathless solar body, the vehicle which will enable us to become one with the Tao. According to Chinese physiology, the sense organs are openings through which man's vital fluid can escape if he is not careful. Taoists therefore teach, guard the senses. The vital fluid can escape through the sense organs because they are openings. The Chinese say that the senses should be used in moderation and in harmony. They name the 6 senses as the eyes, ears, mouth, nose, tongue, and body. The 1st century BC commentator on the Tao Te Ching, He Shanggang, said that by misusing our senses, we are unable to savor the Tao. By misusing our senses. In other words, if they get burned out, they no longer function as points of sensitivity and receptivity. We lose our spiritual light and our faculty for hearing the voices of silence. Zhuangzi said, those who lose their inborn nature to the vulgarity of the times may be called upside down people. True, how true it is. Taoism teaches when man lets his life force be spent, he is shortening his lifespan. Liu Yiming said, people age because they indulge in emotions and passions. 100 worries affect their minds. Myriad affairs weary their bodies. Expending their vitality, exhausting their spirit, they take the false to be real, misery for happiness. Their living potential is cut away to the point where it nearly perishes entirely. Because the root is unstable, they grow old and die. This cannot be attributed to fate, for they bring it on themselves. The dangers of misusing the senses is a theme that appears in the spiritual teachings of all the world's religions. The Hindu Mahabharata says, of the 5 senses belonging to man, If one springeth a leak, then from that single hole runneth out all his intelligence, even like water running out from a perforated leathern vessel. One Eastern Orthodox saint wrote, "When the door of the steam baths is continually left open, the heat inside rapidly escapes through it." Likewise, the soul, in its desire to say many things, dissipates its remembrance of God through the door of speech, even though everything it says may be good. Ideas of value always shun verbosity. Timely silence, then, is precious, for it is nothing less than the mother of the wisest thoughts. When you are silent and contemplative in a portion of your brain, and in another you are very fixed on the task at hand and proceeding at a good clip with your work efficiently, but the silence is there and the attunement is there, you will find that suddenly out of the blue, your inner voice will speak to you, will make a comment, will contribute an idea, will send some word of comfort, or give you an interesting technique to accomplish something that is physical, that's technical, that has to do with the running of the ranch. It's just amazing what God will tell you when you have those 2 points of attunement, one in the omega of the work, the other in the alpha of your own spiritual being. In reality, these are not far apart. Lao Tzu said, "Those who know do not speak. Those who speak do not know." A modern Taoist teacher, Ni Hua Jing, says, "The key to cultivating Tao lies in the eyes. Be sure to remove all distractions that drain energy away from them. Not only the eyes, but all 6 gates of the senses must be kept pure." In regard to this teaching, I would like to tell you that so many people have so much clutter in their houses. Every little trinket, every little thing that comes along, they tack it on the wall, they put it here, they put it there, so that when you enter the house, there is no clean sweep of vacancy, so that the house becomes a place where you can meditate on God. Do you notice how your eye is stopped when a room is messy and things are all over the place, and you see everything, and if you don't quickly clean it up, you keep looking at all this stuff around you? Well, I think that we should look at clutter in terms of every single item that is in our house and in our rooms. And we look at the image, or we look at the focus, or whatever it is. Sometimes things can be focuses, little statues of this or that saint, but they may not be very nice. They may not add to our own sense of the vision of that saint. I am very particular about putting a statue or a picture anywhere. If I can see God more clearly and that saint more clearly without the picture, I get rid of the picture and I look directly at the saint. So think about this, and think about children, how their eyes get stopped on every single object that you leave around, when you would like them to simply fix their eyes on one important thing that will carry them back to their presence. Let's all go looking at our surroundings and see what we don't want to stop our eye, so that the eye cannot go beyond and into the eye of God. A picture is valuable when, because you look at it, you pass through it and enter a plane of the mind of God. If it doesn't do that for you, get rid of it. We don't need a lot of ornaments, because we have so much richness of the Spirit around us. When distraction is kept away from your eyes and ears, you will be able to keep your energy full and your spirit whole. By having noise or continual music playing, even if it's classical music, it is taking your attention, and with your attention goes your energy. And so this is the ancient Chinese teaching, and it is absolutely correct. Sometimes I love to be absolutely still and listen to a magnificent piece of music. When it is over, I enjoy the silence. I greatly enjoy the silence of my space, because there's nothing then between me and God. Keep your mind from wandering. Do not let external circumstances disturb you, but always keep calm and enjoy peace. Value every moment of your day and recognize that moments are where you lose energy or multiply it because your focus is in a focus of God. Too much speech is not good. To speak less is favorable. To keep silent is best. When you unite your energy in silence with the mystery of the universe, the wholeness of the universal truth nakedly appears within you. In his work, A Trilogy on the Threefold Flame of Life, the Ascended Master Saint Germain gives his maxim for spiritual progress. Attention is the key. Now you recognize that you have these points of attention, the five senses, the openings. Notice how, when something is burning, how the sense of smell is heightened, and you sniff, sniff, sniff to find out what is burning. It's an attention getter, isn't it? Through all of our senses, our attention is pulled. Where man's attention goes, there goes his energy, and he himself can only follow. In a dictation given on New Year's Eve, 1986, the Ascended Master El Morya said that it is the desperate need of the hour to keep our attention locked in our mighty I Am presence. He said, I ask the question, how many can at will make the contact with a presence that comes as a feeling of love descending, a feeling so powerful as to exclude all other awareness of a planet? How many of you can do this at will? You need not raise your hands, because it is a very private matter between you and God. If you can do it at will, then increase your adeptship by making that will more and more powerful. Beloved ones, this can be yours. But you must stop chattering, stop seeking so many interchanges with others. Let those in the valleys of the world see so much television, so much contact, 24 hours a day, with outer things going on. These take your attention from your presence and make you worry and have that over-concern, which makes you incapable of mobilizing your forces to defeat the whole ball of Maya that is before you, the whole ball of illusion. Now that's the real trick. That's what you want to learn to do. To recognize such a great power and presence of God in and around and through you. And to see this ball of Maya for what it is. It's vicious, it's toxic, it's decadent, it's lethal. But at the same time, it's illusion. You've packed an awful lot of energy into it. And when unleashed, it could actually destroy you. But in your mind, you have to see it beneath the feet of the Blessed Mother Mary or Kuan Yin, under the control of Shiva. That's really what El Morya wants you to do, to get to this place of this inner decreeing and this inner affirmation of yourself as Atman. Atman is the name for Brahman within us. Brahman in the great central sun is Brahman. He places himself in us, so we call it the Atman. So it is the Spirit of God that dwells in us, the Spirit. So you see why it is important to contemplate God, because when you do so, God teaches you and you teach yourself these techniques whereby you are truly becoming God. That is why it's very important to guard your attention all through the day. So guard those moments, guard your life. The seeker asks, how can I return to the Tao? The perfect man answers. The perfect man, your real self, your Christ self, speaks to you and says, first, apprentice yourself to an enlightened teacher. Although it is not explicit in the Tao Te Ching, later Taoist sages acknowledged the necessity for a teacher on the spiritual path. Liu Yiming said, the way of the Tao must be taught. If you do not meet an enlightened teacher, everything goes awry. Liu Yen said, "It is necessary to seek the guidance of elevated real people, unascended and ascended masters, in order to understand the way." He said that when there is a true transmission of the teaching individually from a teacher, there is an opening up in the darkness, resulting in clear understanding. Clarity is what we want. Clarity between our soul and God. Nothing in between. Just a clear voice, a clear vibration, a clear essence. No misqualified substance causing static. You eventually realize the hidden mystery. You know the great way. This is regarded as attainment. The seeker asks, "How can I restore the vitality, energy, and spirit I have lost? How can I cultivate the Tao?" The perfect man answers, "The first step is to purify and strengthen your body." Taoism teaches that the practice of mysticism starts with a strong and healthy body. I would like to point out to you that the perfect diet that the Ascended Masters have given to us is the macrobiotic diet. I was speaking to some old friends recently that I hadn't seen in many years, who were in very dire straits in their health. So I was introducing to them some teachings and principles of the macrobiotic diet. And they were going along thinking they were doing the very best things for their health, eating all the wrong kinds of food for all the wrong kinds of reasons, not understanding the cause and effect in their bodies. And I realized once again that probably none of us at all could come to an understanding of what is the heart, what is the science, what is the action of the macrobiotic diet of ourselves by experimentation. Yet most people in the world today pick up some knowledge they hear about what's good for you and what isn't, what they should be eating, what they shouldn't be eating. All kinds of people who are not scientists come up with these fabulous raw food diets or all kinds of other things. And when you come to sincere people who really want to eat the right food, they are making an effort, but they are so far from the path of the true balance of the yin and yang forces. And so diet is something that must be taught. You need to have it taught to you by a good teacher, a teacher of experience. It is not logical according to the logic that you know. It is not realistic according to the Western diet that you know. And so it is something that has to be learned. The same is often true with religion. Just as people think that they know what is good for their bodies, even while their bodies are in terrible condition, so they think they know what is good for their souls. And most people in this world do think that they are experts in religion, and that they don't have to be taught religion or to be taught about God, because they already know what religion is supposed to be. So there are many areas in the world when everybody accepts that you need to be taught and to learn. But those of diet, mysticism, religion, people think, I don't have to study to know this. So I gave some basic principles and teachings to these friends, and they immediately knew it was true. And they immediately saw the effects on their body from the foods they were eating, as I explained why, from the yin and yang standpoint, these foods would so affect their bodies. And then they could see the whole thing, almost with an instantaneous vision of what they had done wrong and what they now had to do right. And they were eager to get on their way. The man had spent a whole year healing himself, because he was at that age in the 50s when many people do not survive. Men especially, they die of heart attacks. 3 of his closest colleagues, younger and older than he, near his age, had died in that year. So he had decided he wanted to live, and he decided he was going to heal his body. But when I saw him, his heart was just as bad as if he had done nothing for it, because he did not know what he really had to do to keep that heart safe from heart attack and heart disease by diet. So the shock of realizing that one is doing all that one can, perhaps on the spiritual path or on the path of diet, and not really realizing how sick one is, how sick the soul is without true religion, and how sick the body is without the right diet. It is sad to find people in that state who are so very sincere. And the sincere ones, when you find them, will immediately grasp the truth and see that you really do need a teacher on this path. Olivia Cone writes, "Body and mind in early Chinese mysticism, though clearly distinguished, are not seen as opposites. Rather, they represent different aspects of the same continuum of the Tao and have to be purified in equal measure. If there is no physical being, no earthly vessel in which the spirit can dwell, then there can be no foundation of the Tao to work with. According to one text, Lao Tzu said, 'My body is the carriage of the spirit, the habitation of the spirit, the host of the spirit.' The Taoists' program for strengthening the body involves healing practices and diet that nourishes specific organs with certain foods and herbs. This is our goal and our practice here at the Royal Teton Ranch. It includes exercise systems such as Tai Chi Chuan and Daoyin, as well as breathing exercises. All these practices are designed to stimulate and increase the flow of qi. We can say that qi is actually anchored in the seat of the soul chakra, the point of that center. Qi is a very powerful force and energy. You can weaken your qi, for instance, by eating your drinks with ice cubes. Eating ice drinks with every meal weakens that qi, depletes you of your qi, weakens the bladder, weakens the kidneys. Cold foods, ice creams, salads, popsicles, all those things that are cold, you are placing a coldness in the area of the body where there is an intense focus of fire. And that fire is your qi, it's your energy, it's the point of the center of the soul from which the soul can function and be in that yang state of completing the day victoriously. And so look how the habit of Americans is to eat so many cold things in the summertime. And the price we pay is to have the corresponding illnesses in those areas in the wintertime when all the flus come along. Then we take drugs that are yin to cure those diseases, and then we get more yin, and gradually as the years go by, these organs get more debilitated, and the soul doesn't have the qi, the real energy to be centered, to be able to meditate. I was talking to someone recently whom I hadn't seen in many years, and in the years that I hadn't seen him, he had been in Thailand 6 years as a Buddhist monk, meditating 8 hours a day. That's really an amazing feat. He said after a while, he decided he needed to come back to the United States and do something practical. But think of the discipline. I mean, meditating 8 hours a day, even if it's broken up, takes a strong body, a strong will, a strong mind, and strong qi. And there it is. If you don't have those, you're not apt to be meditating even 15 minutes a day. So let's see how Houston Smith defines qi. He says, though it literally means breath, qi actually means vital energy. The Taoists used it to refer to the power of the Tao that they experienced coursing through them, or not coursing because it was blocked, and their main object was to further its flow. Qi fascinated the Taoists. William Blake registered their feelings precisely when he exclaimed, "Energy is delight." It certainly is. When you have all the energy you need to do what you need to do every day, aren't you simply delighted? You're joyous. Think of the one reason why we are not so joyous. It's because we don't have enough energy to do all the things we want to do. It's time to really look and see what is sapping our strength. There are a lot of things that we can stop doing and gain back bit by bit the momentum we need to accomplish that great creative work we're working on. For energy is the life force, and the Taoists loved life. To be alive is good. To be more alive is better. To be always alive is best. Hence the Taoist immortality cults, whose goal was to live forever. The seeker asks, the first step in cultivating the Tao is to purify and strengthen my body. What is the second step? The perfect man answers, and what does he say? He says, become empty. That's the great theme of Taoism, become empty. It's the theme of Jesus Christ, become empty that you might be filled and that I might infill you with my Christ presence. Lao Tzu taught, reach the pole of emptiness. To be empty is to be full. Simply because nature abhors a vacuum, if you empty yourself, God rushes in. The mystics of all ages have understood this truth. Simply put, create a vacuum and Mother Nature fills it. And the Mother Nature we're talking about is the great Mother Tao. When we empty ourselves of all non-essentials, Mother Tao fills us with her essence. When we are empty of ego, vainglory, and all self-attachment to ourselves as doers, God fills us with his spirit, and then we know ourselves as instruments of the great doer, the Tao. Then the Tao loves through us, heals through us, teaches through us, and works his works through us. God fills us with his spirit, and therefore I and the spirit of my Father, Mother God are one. Jesus said, I of mine own self can do nothing. The Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the works. The Father was in Jesus because he emptied himself. The Mother was in Jesus because he emptied himself. Thomas à Kempis wrote in the Imitation of Christ, the Lord gives his blessing where he finds the vessels empty. Because the perfect man is empty, he always receives the blessing of the Tao. His emptiness allows him to be continually renewed by the Spirit. His source of power is never exhausted. And thus it is written, perfected people are endowed from a resource that is never exhausted. Lao Tzu wrote, to be worn out is to be renewed. Great fullness appears empty. Its use is inexhaustible. Who is able to have excess to offer to the world? Only the man of Tao. Zhuangzi says, the perfect man embodies completely what is inexhaustible. He may be called the reservoir of heaven. Pour into it, and it is never full. Dip from it, and it never runs dry. This is called the precious light. The precious light. The seeker asks, I know that I must become empty to cultivate the Tao. How do I become empty? The perfect man answers, by fasting the mind and forgetting the self. The master psychologist Kuthumi says, there is a pre-stage to the stage of emptiness. Listen well to this. It is called defining the identity. He teaches that we must first define who we are now, today, right now, as mind, as self. We cannot go on to the stage of emptiness if we do not define the self. When we do, then we can fast the mind and forget the self. Therefore, one must feed the mind the way of the spiritual teaching and the discipline of one's calling, livelihood, or profession. Just as one must first feed the mind in order to fast the mind, so one must remember the self in order to forget the self. Remembering yourself is working on your psychology, and especially establishing the connection between your inner loving child and your inner loving adult. The abandoned inner child or soul must find oneness with the Holy Christ self, and this child can only find that oneness through your own inner loving adult. The reason that the first step to the restoration of vitality, energy, and spirit is to purify and strengthen the body is that a pure and strong body is the foundation for a pure and strong mind. Likewise, the vessel that is emptied must be pure and strong, lest it break when the Tao should enter. Too much light can cause the fragile vessel to shatter. God will not do that, and therefore he withholds the fullness of himself. Let's talk about then defining the self and nourishing the mind before we can fast the mind and forget the self. Mark Prophet had a way of teaching this. He said you have to first be selfish in order that you may then be generous. And what he meant by that is that you have to work on yourself. You have to become who you are. You have to become a balanced person. As I was saying earlier, you cannot give away the core of yourself, and the core of yourself cannot be marred or fragmented or injured. You must be willing to work on your psychology in therapy if necessary, or with the many wonderful self-help books that are being written today on psychology. It is very important to have a special kind of teacher for that, a therapist. And so the building of self and the defining of your identity, the nourishing of the mind so that you are equipped for a profession and a calling whereby you can extol and embody the Tao the rest of your life is very important. The path of initiates has a part of it as the surrender to the will of God. How can you surrender to the will of God if there is no one there that is surrendering? If you are a fragmented personality, if you are not balanced mentally, or if you have not accomplished anything or created for yourself a trade or a work of the hands or something that you do for a livelihood whereby you are also perfecting the soul. This is why we must take care to help children and teenagers and people of all ages to discover who they are, to become who they are, and to be satisfied and fulfilled in who they are, so that they no longer have to be attached to who they are. And who they are easily slips into the divine matrix of the Holy Christ self. And we have no more need to be paying so much attention to the self and its needs. And we slay the ego so that the inner child can merge through the inner loving adult with a Holy Christ self. That inner child, as you know, that I define as the soul. So you see, it is very difficult for someone who does not pursue the first steps of feeding the mind, nourishing the self, remembering the self. It is very difficult if you have not done that properly. If you come from a dysfunctional home and you have not had that healing that you need. There are wants, there are needs. The soul is crying inside of you to be loved and to be made whole. And so you must become the healer of that soul and that self. You must find that wholeness. Only then can you go on to the second stage of this process. Forgetting the self or losing the self is another way Taoists describe the process of becoming empty. Losing the self does not mean obliterating your own identity. It means losing the lesser self. It means losing the sense of a self that is separate from the Tao. It means acting in accord with your true nature, the nature of Tao, so that all of your actions are spontaneous and natural.